The wind over Virel's highlands bore the scent of wood smoke and damp soil, whispering of harvest and hearth. Beneath a grey canopy of clouds, the distant bell of Duranhold's citadel tolled the hour, solemn and deep, its voice swallowed by the rustling oaks and the murmurs of a land yet unaware of its own coming turn. On that same wind, cloaked in road dust and silence, came a lone figure, a man whose name was known to no one and whose past clung to him like a shadow that could not be cast off. He bore no crest, no seal, nor any sign of noble allegiance, only a satchel worn thin and a gait shaped by careful watchfulness. He had once gone by the name Corven. In the alleyways of eastern cities, Veldris, Lorwyn, and before them the sea-stained warrens of Caldere, he had been known to those who trafficked in shadow. Not a cutthroat, nor a killer, but a ghost among locks and vaults, a hand swift and deft. He had stolen from the vaults of a bishop, from the purse of a prince, and once, though only he and a dying captain knew the truth, from the sealed reliquary of the Everflame Abbey. Yet that was years behind him, and the man now crossing the mossy glens and hidden sheep paths toward Duranhold bore no sign of his past, save for a slender knife hidden in the lining of his boot, and the odd habit of watching corners twice before turning them. He arrived at the gates near dusk, when the guards were stiff from standing and too tired for proper suspicion. They asked his name, he gave one not his own, asked his business, he claimed trade. He was let through. He did not come seeking redemption. He came to disappear. But the court of Duranhold, high in its keep of pale stone and blue banners, was already caught in storms of its own. Duke Ferran, aging and haunted by the death of his only heir, had begun gathering advisers from among the common folk, hoping to stir the hearts of his people and appease the gods whose favor he feared had fled him. Then the pale king rose, weightless, robes falling like mist. He stepped from the cocoon onto the stone. Then, walk with me. He turned toward a door none had seen before. Beyond it, a corridor of mirrors, and in each one not reflection but memory. The thief and the thief turned, night followed. The journey was not yet over. It had only just begun. Through the corridor of mirrors, Kael and Anve walked at the Pale King's side, their footsteps lost beneath the hush of ancient stone. Each mirror shimmered with scenes not their own, visions of kingdoms before names, betrayals that birthed empires, flames that consumed and remade. The Pale King spoke little. His voice, when it came, was wind through old branches. These are not my memories alone. They are the roots of your world, forgotten by design. But even truths revealed in whispers cannot stop war, and war had already come. Far to the north, the grey host descended upon Duranhold. The Duke's banners rose to meet them, and among the battlements rode Sir Brannan, bearing both steel and suspicion. The host was vast, more than scouts had feared, their armor glinting like oil in sunlight, their weapons carved with runes that bled smoke. At their center marched a herald in bone-white mail, faceless, wordless, but bearing the sigil of the Pale King. And above them all, the sky broke. The air turned bitter, and fire rained not from siege engines, but from the mouths of priests twisted by old oaths, chanting words lost to holy men. Duranhold would not hold. Kael saw this, though not with his eyes. The Pale King had shown him. Mirrors became windows. Kael fell to his knees. "We must go," he said, "now." Anve looked to the king. "Can you stop them?" The Pale King's answer came not in words, but in a memory made real. The chamber trembled. Stone split. Light surged from the floor, and the three were elsewhere. They stood in the very heart of Duranhold's keep, within the throne room, where chaos ruled. Fire licked the banners. Knights clashed in the galleries. The Duke himself fought beside Sir Brannan, bloodied but unbowed. The grey host had breached the gates. All froze when the Pale King appeared. The bone-helmed herald stepped forward, dropped to one knee. "Master." But the Pale King turned from him. "No," he said, "not yours, not anymore." And Kael moved. In that moment of shock, he became what he had always been, not merely knight, nor merely thief, but both. He slipped past the host's front line, through smoke and clash and confusion, toward the siege platforms at the rear. There, shadowed and half-guarded, stood the infernal engine feeding fire into the sky. A relic of old, bound in chains and etched in blood. It was a curious time, scholars dining beside reeves, hedge priests given audience, and murmurs of a contest for a new protector of the realm, one who might be made knight, not by blood, but by deed. Kael scaled the supports like ivy, feet silent, hands sure. He found the runes that pulsed and whispered. He found the sigils that bound the storm, and he stole them, not with blade, nor with strength, but with cunning. He took the keystone from its cradle, rewired the sigil's path with melted iron from his own blade, and inverted the runes so the engine turned upon itself. The result was blinding. The platform exploded in a bloom of silver fire. The tide of the host halted. Screams rang as the fire turned backward, consuming their rear ranks. From the throne room, the Pale King raised his hand. "This war ends now." The bone-helmed herald tried to rise, but found his limbs frozen. The host faltered. Their eyes dimmed. Kael returned through the smoke, his armor scorched, cloak half-burned but standing. Sir Brannan stared at him in disbelief. "How did you?" Kael answered only with a breath. "Sometimes the key to the lock isn't honor. It's knowing where the hinges are." The Pale King looked upon him, then nodded once. "You have rewritten the memory." Duranhold stood. And for the first time, the thief, the knight, and the king walked as one. But the ashes of the grey host had not all scattered, and deeper still, beneath mirrors and bone, something else stirred. The next storm had begun to dream. Beneath Duranhold, far below its ancient cellars and wine keeps, there lay a chamber sealed since the days when God still walked among men. It was not marked on maps. It was not spoken of in oaths. But it remembered, and now it began to wake. The Pale King stood in silence atop the blackened stairs of the great hall, his eyes closed as if listening to some deeper chord. Around him, knights tended the wounded, stewards wept over torn banners, and Sir Brannan barked orders to what was left of the city guard. Kael leaned on a broken column, his breath still catching in his throat. Envy approached from the shadows. "You feel it too, don't you?" Kael nodded. "Something's still below, and it's not finished." The Pale King opened his eyes. "There is one memory that was never meant to be seen. It lies beneath the mirror vaults, a sealed sanctum." Brannan overheard. "What memory?" The Pale King turned his gaze upon him, and for the first time his voice bore iron. "The one that cannot be rewritten, only faced." A company was formed. Kael, Anve, Sir Brannan, 3 knights of the Citadel Guard, and the Pale King himself. Corven watched all with the eye of a man who once survived by slipping past notice, but now found himself studying a new kind of lock, the workings of trust. His first entanglement came in the form of a spilled goblet. He had taken work in the lesser kitchens, ferrying trays and scraping plates. They descended by a hidden stair in the chapel of Emberlight, where the flame had long since gone out. The descent took hours. Stone turned to obsidian. Air grew still, too still, as though the place held its breath. Along the walls, carvings emerged, scenes of a battle never recorded, men and women tearing open the sky, a king breaking his crown upon an altar, a shadow with no face devouring fire. Kael touched one carving. It was warm. At the sanctum's door, the pale king spoke 3 words in a forgotten tongue. The runes split, and the door melted like wax. Inside, they found not a vault, but a battlefield, timeless, silent, waiting. A mirror, large as a gatehouse wall, shimmered in the center, framed in black iron veined with bloodstone. As they approached, it rippled, and from its surface figures stepped forth, copies, shadows, each of them. Kael saw himself clad in darkened armor, blade dripping gold flame. The thief he might have been had he never turned. Enve's mirror image grinned like a jackal. Brannon's doppelganger bore a crown of rusted nails. The mirror had not shown them reflections. It had summoned their worst selves. They fought. Steel rang. Magic flared. The chamber shook. Kael dodged his twin's blade, every movement eerily familiar. He could not outfight it. He had trained it, fed it, been it. So he outthought it. He feigned a stumble, drawing the shadow thief close. Then, slipping beneath its guard, he pressed his hand against its chest, right over the hidden pocket no one else could have known. A thief's secret. There he drove his blade. The shadow froze, eyes wide, and crumbled to dust. Enve dueled her twin in silence, darting like smoke, until a twist of the wrist and a blade through the ribs ended the echo. Brannon, bloodied, dropped to one knee, his double raised a hammer. Kael flung a dagger. It struck true. Brannon stood, staring at Kael with new eyes. Then the mirror cracked. The pale king stepped forward. This is the wound beneath the world. It bleeds into dreams, into war, into memory. Seal it, and we delay the end. Leave it, and all will unravel. Kael turned to the others. We seal it. Together. The pale king raised his arms. The mirror screamed. Light poured forth, tearing at the walls. The sanctum shook. Then silence. When the light faded, the mirror was gone. Only the chamber remained empty. They emerged days later to find Duranhold already rebuilding. Smoke cleared. Songs returned. The Duke, though aged, had survived and named Kael protector of the realm. Brannon stood at his side. Enve disappeared again. Some said west, others east, always in shadow. And the pale king vanished without word, though Kael sometimes felt his gaze in dreams. Peace reigned for a time. One evening, while delivering honeyed partridge to the high table, a steward tripped, the silver trencher slipping toward the Duke's lap. Corven moved without thought. He caught the edge, righted the goblet, and returned it to the Duke's hand in a motion smooth as riverstone. But Kael never hung up his blade, for he knew the truth. A thief steals what others guard. A knight guards what others cannot. He had been both, and the world would need him again. It did not take long. The peace that followed was as thin as frost before sunrise. It cracked, not with war horns or burning towers, but with a whisper carried from the farthest reach of the east. A tale of a village vanished without trace, of dreams that walked in daylight, and of a song sung by no voice, heard only in sleep. The Duke summoned Kael once more, and Kael rode again. He came to the edge of the wormwood, where the trees grew tall as towers and the canopy hid the stars. There, the ground itself hummed with an energy that made his bones ache. He met with the last survivors of the village of Nareth, their eyes hollow, their speech broken. They spoke of children lost to fog, of mirrors appearing in pools that once held only rainwater. Kael looked into one such pool, and saw himself, older, broken, standing at a gate of bone. He stepped back. Something watched from the trees. By nightfall, the wind itself began to change. No longer did it carry the scent of leaves and soil. It carried the smell of dust, old dust. Kael reached for his blade, and then for the small, worn pouch at his belt, the one sewn into his cloak's lining, where no soldier would look. A thief's hiding place. He had placed a single coin there years ago, taken from the reliquary of Everflame Abbey. It was warm. He understood then. The relic had never been what it seemed. It was not only sacred, it was a seal, and something was breaking it. He rode with haste back to Duranhold, but the stars had already begun to shift. The constellations twisted, subtly wrong. The seers babbled of the Ash Crown returning. One whispered that even the Pale King had been but a warden to something greater, something beneath. Kael called a council. Brennan came, his face hard with old grief. Enve returned unbidden, slipping through the hall's shadows with eyes wide. "It's not the same enemy," she said. "It's what they fled." The Duke listened in silence, then turned to Kael. "What would you do?" Kael paused. "I would do what I was trained never to do. I would go deeper." "Deeper than what?" Brannan asked. Kael looked past him, beyond the stone walls, beyond the court and its banners, to the world whose shape was fraying. Deeper than memory. That night he returned to the high tower, where once, in the first days, he had caught a steward's falling goblet and earned a duke's second glance. The same window, the same wind. "And now," he whispered a promise, "I did not come to be seen." It was a small act, and perhaps forgettable, but for the Duke's eyes, which lingered on him a moment longer than they should have. Days passed, and Corven was summoned again, this time to serve in the hall directly, not behind it. "I came to disappear." Then it had been a shield. Now it would be a blade. He gathered his cloak, the one that still bore the hidden seams of his past, and walked toward the edge of all that had been guarded. For in the east, beyond maps, beyond names, something ancient had stirred. And Kael would meet it, not as thief, not as knight, but as both, as the only thing that could walk between what is hidden and what is sworn. Kael passed beyond the known paths east, where old forest gave way to broken hills and stone fields carved not by time, but by intention. Here the wind spoke only in whispers, and even the birds did not sing. At the edge of the known world, where no map dared press ink, he found it, a fissure in the land, wide as a river and black as night. From its depths rose a chant, not of voices, but of echoes, thousands, perhaps millions, saying nothing and everything all at once. Kael stood upon the brink and whispered a name he had never spoken aloud. Ashivar. The fissure opened. He fell, not in body, but in thought. The world blurred. Time unraveled. And in the space between spaces, he saw them, not gods, not kings, not dead, keepers, formless, endless, ancient. They had no eyes, no mouths, no borders, but they watched, and Kael knew he had been seen. They spoke in memory. He was shown his first theft, his hand trembling as he unlatched the bishop's vault. He was shown his first moment in Duranhold, eyes downcast, catching a goblet to avoid the gaze of the court. And he was shown now, standing between what must be sealed and what must be freed. "Why do you come?" they asked in thought. Kael stood firm. "Because none else can. Because I am both key and lock." They turned the world. And he awoke in a city not yet built. Duranhold, unborn, dreamt in fire and song. He walked its streets as shadows of those he knew passed beside him. Brannan, young and laughing, Merian barefoot in gardens, Anve weeping beneath a lantern. It was a test. He moved toward the tower, toward the altar, toward the final seal. And there he saw himself, not a mirror, not a shadow, a child, barefoot, hungry, hiding. Kael knelt. "You never needed to steal," he said. "You needed someone to guard you." He offered the coin. The seal flared. Light, unbearable, divine. He awoke at the fissure edge. Omve beside him. Brannan behind. The pale king on the ridge, watching with eyes that no longer burned, but wept. The fissure closed. The wind returned, and in Duranhold, far away, the bells rang not in warning, but in peace. Kael returned days later, quiet as ever, cloak a little more frayed, step a little slower. He placed the coin in the Duke's hand. "It is done," he said. The Duke smiled. Then once more, to assist with an inventory of the armory, his quiet manner and quick fingers now seen as useful rather than suspect. Each task drew him closer to the heart of the court, and each day he wondered when his name, his real name, would be whispered by some passing guard or merchant. Then we will write songs not just of swords, but of hands that held nothing and chose to give. And in the halls of Duranhold, where once a thief passed unseen, a name was now spoken in reverence. Not Kael, not Corven, but Guardian. But it never was. And then came the hawk. A white falcon, bearing the crest of House Merrow, was found wounded in the outer gardens, its message capsule sealed in gold. The courtiers were abuzz. House Merrow held the western marches and rarely sent missives without cause. The falconer was absent, the guard uncertain. And the Duke, his curiosity piqued, asked for aid. Corven, feigning a boyhood spent among falconers, stepped forth. In truth, he had once stolen from a falcon breeder in Velisar and had spent a fortnight hiding among the birds. With surprising grace, he calmed the bird, removed the scroll, and read it aloud in a voice both sure and slow. The letter warned of riders on the border, a sighting of foreign banners, and the disappearance of a minor noble. The court stirred like reeds in a storm. That night, Corven dined not in the servants' quarters, but in the upper gallery. He was given a name of his choosing for the court's records. He chose Kael. Whispers followed him. Who was this Kael, who spoke with a lowland accent, yet carried himself like a hedgelord? Why did the Duke seek his counsel on matters of maps and security? Why did the Knight Commander, stern Sir Brannan, glare at him with suspicion, while the Lady Marian, cousin to the Duke, watched him as one watches an interesting puzzle piece? Each favor, each deed, drew him deeper into the fabric of a court, unaware that its new adviser had once slipped through their storerooms in the dead of night. But not all were fooled, not all welcomed him. Among those whose eyes watched Kael with more than passing interest was Sir Brannan of the Iron Banner, a veteran of the northern campaigns and a man forged in the bitterness of betrayal. He had lost brothers to poisoned treaties and daughters to the cold of royal indifference. To him, trust was a blade turned inward, and strangers bearing luck were most dangerous of all. Sir Brannan began with questions, soft as snow at first, veiled in idle talk. He asked after Kael's place of birth, the names of his kin, the trade routes he claimed to have walked. But Kael, ever nimble of tongue, gave answers shaped like river stones, smooth, ungraspable, worn of edge, yet even a ghost leaves footprints. And in the markets of the lower ward, a wiry-eyed fence by the name of Targil caught wind of a voice he half remembered, one that had once whispered through the thieves' guilds of Veldris like mist along rooftops. He said nothing at first, but coin and curiosity are close cousins. It was Targil who slipped a parchment into Sir Brannan's glove. No name, no mark, only a drawing of a pendant once taken from the Bishop of Lethrian, and the words, "The hand that held this still lives." Kael, unaware, was drawn ever closer to the Duke's circle. A saboteur had breached the eastern granaries, setting fire to stores meant for the winter levy. The guards found no prints, no forced locks, only an open window and a single knot, expertly tied, the kind only sailors or thieves used. Panic whispered through the corridors. Lady Merian approached Kael that night, veiled in midnight blue, her voice barely a breath. "You read men like ledgers," she said. "Tell me then, who steals from us now?" Kael should have said little. He should have offered modest counsel and returned to his quarters. Instead, he studied the map, examined the knots recovered, and walked the scorched ruins with the captain of the watch. Within a day, he named a culprit. Wrongly, it turned out, though the man arrested had smuggled spices for years, and few mourned him. Still, it was enough. The Duke raised Kael before the court, named him advisor in matters of watch and wall, and the banners of Duranhold now bore his hand in their defense. But as honor grew, so too did the hunt. Sir Brannan now trailed Kael's movements through scribes and stewards, noting every inconsistency. Targil sent word to old allies, and one night, a hooded rider came through the eastern gate. A woman known only as Anve, once Corven's shadow partner, now free of prison and burdened by both memory and score. She carried with her a blade notched by salt air rust and a letter sealed in wax black as pitch. In it, names, dates, crimes unpunished. And the final line, "The thief you seek wears honor like a stolen cloak." In the undercroft of Duranhold, where light seldom reached and the walls dripped with forgotten oaths, Sir Brannan unrolled the letter and stared into the truth. His breath held, his choice yet unmade. Above, Kael stood at the battlements, speaking quietly with Lady Merian about patrol schedules and the thinning stores. "Winter comes early this year," she said. Kael nodded, watching the horizon. "Aye, and not all storms come with snow." Behind them, the bells of the citadel rang once more. This time, not for supper or prayer, but for judgment. The bells tolled deep and slow, echoing through stone corridors like the heartbeat of something ancient roused from slumber. In the court's upper gallery, nobility gathered beneath tapestries faded by time and firelight. The Duke sat throned and quiet, his brow drawn like a blade unsheathed. Kael, summoned without explanation, stood before the assembly in a plain tunic, his hair wind-tousled from the battlements. His eyes scanned the faces. Lady Merian, lips pursed and unreadable, Sir Brannan, standing not beside him but across, the steward Eladrine, whispering to a scribe with eager ink-stained fingers. Duke Ferran rose with the gravity of age and war, his voice dry as autumn leaves. "A letter has reached my hand," he said, "bearing accusations weighty as iron, crimes of theft, deception, and betrayal." Kael did not move. He felt the room still around him, as if breath itself had paused to listen. "You are named Kael, or rather, Corven of Caldare." A hush. Even the fire dared not crackle. "You who advised me in defense and judgment are accused of having once stolen from the sacred reliquary of Everflame Abbey, of defrauding merchants in Veldris, and of aiding in the disappearance of a noble seal in Lorruin." Sir Brannan stepped forward, the black-sealed letter in hand. "I sought truth where shadows clung. This letter came by way of a woman called Anve, known thief and fugitive. Her word alone I would not trust. But within, she names places only the guilty could know." He turned to the Duke, then to Kael. "If you deny these charges, name your place of birth. Speak your father's trade." Kael met his gaze without flinch. The silence was long. Then, "I deny nothing." A stir ran through the hall. He turned to the Duke. "I was Corven once. I took what I could, for none offered what I needed. I survived in a world that trades virtue for silver, and I wronged many. But since I came here, I have taken nothing save what you gave freely. I've guarded your stores, your walls, your people. I've fought lies, not with more lies, but with action. If that earns no grace, then cast me out. But know this, I did not lie to harm you. I lied to begin again." There was something in his voice that arrested the court, not pleading, but resolute, as if every word was carved from the stone of his will. Lady Merian stepped forward. Her voice, soft but unwavering, cut through the murmurs. "When the falcon came wounded, none knew how to read the seal. None dared touch it but him. When fire licked our granaries, he risked misjudgment to protect us. He's lived among us, not above us, and he's served better than many born to banners." She turned to the Duke. "What does it mean to be noble, blood or choice?" The Duke's eyes moved between them. Long moments passed. Then he spoke. "Let all hear this," he said. "A man is not made by the shadows of his past, but by the fire he carries forward." He stood. "Corven of Chaldea, called Kael in our hall, you are hereby named Knight of Duranhold, not by birth, but by deed. You shall bear our crest, and with it our trust. But know this, from this day forth, your honor is no longer borrowed. It is earned anew, each day. Should you falter, your fall shall be longer than most." The hall broke into a murmur like thunder across a plain. Sir Brannan said nothing, only watched Kael with a gaze unreadable. Later, as torches flickered low in the keep and silence wrapped the high towers, Kael stood alone beneath the banners. The wind spoke only to him. Onve had not been found. She had vanished once more, her message delivered, her role fulfilled. Perhaps she believed she had ruined him. Perhaps she had saved him. He would never know. But now, beneath stars older than kingdoms, a thief no longer, Kael of Duranhold turned his face toward the coming trials, not as a fugitive, but as a knight. And not all storms he knew had passed. Indeed, the storm waiting beyond Duranhold's walls was unlike any the court had foreseen. 3 nights after Kael's knighthood was declared, a rider arrived, his horse foam lashed, its flanks streaked with sweat and blood. The man bore the livery of House Merrow, though half torn and blackened. He collapsed before the Duke's court without breath to speak, save for one broken phrase: "The Grey Host rides." That name had not been heard in a generation. A warband once thought extinguished, a host of outlanders whose allegiance was not to kings, but to the old order that believed in conquest by fire and return through fear. They had raided the borderlands long ago, only to vanish into the northern wastes when the High Princes united against them. Kael stood beside Sir Brannan when the rider's words were spoken, the knight's brow hard as old stone. "I saw their banners once," Brannan muttered, "before the siege of Careth. Ash and bone. Scouts were sent, none returned. Then came the smoke. Village after village along the western roads was found burned, not looted. The ground itself left salted, the wells choked with bone and thorn. And always the same sigil, a grey hand open-palmed, painted in ash. Duke Ferran called the banners. His council gathered in haste, poring over maps and old texts, seeking knowledge of this enemy, returned from shadow. Kael sat now, not at the edge, but at the center. And it was he who first suggested a raid into the Red Vale to intercept the Grey Host before they reached the forest pass. Sir Brannan protested. "We have no certainty of their numbers nor their route. To divide our strength now is to gamble the safety of the hold." Kael countered, his voice calm, deliberate. "To wait is to let them choose the ground. Let us strike where the land is narrow, the trees thick. There we may turn their strength against them." Brannan's jaw clenched, but he said no more. The Duke gave the order. Kael rode with a force of 40, a mix of trained knights and green squires, hardened guards and 2 of Lady Merian's best scouts. They rode through mists heavy with silence, the land itself hushed as if listening. They found the host not in march, but already encamped near the shrine of Virith Hollow, their fires banked low and watchposts cunningly hidden. The host was larger than expected, twice. Kael knew then they had been lured. The host had waited, had let the scouts escape with tales of weakness, to draw forth a force they could crush. Retreat was death. So he turned instead to deception. That night, under cover of rain and fog, Kael led his company not in attack, but in a ruse. They left false trails, lit decoy fires, and released captured livestock to stampede through the outer edges of the enemy's encampment. Confusion erupted. Fires were lit where no men stood, horns called out from empty ridges. In that chaos, Kael struck at a narrow choke between two ridges where the host's lieutenants had camped. The battle was brutal, short, and surgical. 3 commanders fell, 1 was taken prisoner. They rode back bloodied but alive, the grey host harried and delayed. Duranhold's court received them as heroes, but Kael saw Brannan's eyes, not hateful, but puzzled, as though the man could not reconcile the spectre of a thief with the tactician who now saved their lands. Lady Merian, however, met him at the steps. "You fight like a man with something to prove," she said. Kael bowed his head. "I fight like a man with debts," but the victory brought no peace. The prisoner taken, a woman with a brand across her neck and a gaze that bore through stone, spoke only one thing before biting out her tongue. "The flame must be extinguished. The pale king rises." A phrase like a poison, spreading through the court. Duke Ferran summoned all scribes, seers, and scholars. The phrase appeared in no tome, yet whispers of a pale king had once circled old soldiers' fires. A warlord who vanished into myth. A tyrant said to command oaths beyond death. Kael now stood not merely as knight, but as one whose past had granted him understanding of the underworld's language, of codes, signs, forgotten allegiances. And he feared, in ways he could not say aloud, that the world he had left behind as a thief may hold the keys the realm now needed to survive. As winter neared, with ash on the wind and shadows in the forests, Kael was sent south to seek what the court could not, forgotten allies, buried truths, and one name spoken only in corners. Anve. He would find her. He must. For the thief who became a knight was needed again, but not to wear honor like a cloak. This time, he must wield it like a blade. The road south led through lands long neglected by the crown-wooded stretches, once rich in trade, now hollow with silence. Here, the laws of Duranhold bore less weight, and old names held power, brigand kings, forgotten seers, and hedge knights who bent the knee to no banner. Here, Kael was not a knight. He was once again a traveller cloaked in wariness. He rode alone, wearing neither sigil nor steel, his blade wrapped in cloth, his coins split between pouches, one visible, one hidden. It was an old practice, necessary now. 2 days beyond the watchposts, he came to the town of Ellen's Wain, where roads dipped into a valley drowned in fog. There, in the broken hall of what once had been a temple, he found his first whisper of her. Anve had passed through weeks before. She had spoken little, paid in silver etched with northern runes, and asked after an alchemist named Dunthea. The name stirred something in Kael, half memory, half dread. Dunthea had once forged poisons for the Black Guild, until he vanished after a debt unpaid. Kael followed the trail westward, across stone bridges strangled by moss, through hamlets that stared too long at strangers. On the 12th night, in a hollow where mist clung like breath to bone, he found Dunthea. The man was not dead, though he lived like one. Half-blind, fingers stained with caustic dyes, he worked out of a ruin beneath an overgrown watchtower. He did not recognize Kael, but he remembered Anve. "She had a map," the old poisoner rasped, worn soft, like it had been folded and read 1,000 times. She asked me about herbs that quiet the mind, not kill quiet, said she needed to wake someone from a dream. Kael frowned. What kind of dream? The kind you don't choose. That night, Kael sat long by the fire, the scent of bitter root and iron thick in the air. He remembered Anve as she had been, sharp, fire-eyed, always half a step away from betrayal or brilliance. What dream could compel her to such a course? In the morning, Dunthir was gone. His vials shattered, his notes burned. Kael found only a single sigil scratched into the stone, a circle broken in two, with 3 lines slashed through its heart. He had seen it before, carved into the stones beneath the reliquary of Everflame Abbey on the night he had stolen the bishop's relic. It was not a thief's mark. It was older, deeper. He pressed on. 4 days later, through rain that never ceased, and roads that turned to mud beneath his boots, Kael reached the forgotten fortress of Harrowfen, where the walls leaned like tired sentries and the gates had rusted in place. Here, the dead were said to speak if one listened too long, and the dreams of children wandered where their bodies could not. Here he found her. Anve stood on the parapets, her cloak torn, her face leaner, fiercer. She did not reach for a blade, nor flee. Instead, she turned and said, "You came." "I wasn't sure you would." Kael answered her only with silence. She led him within. The halls of Harrowfen were cold and half-flooded. Candles burned in alcoves, their flames unmoving. "You're here because of the Pale King," she said. "But that's not his name, not truly. That's what the Grey Host calls him. He was a prince once, before the world forgot what princes could become." Kael watched her. "What is he now?" Anve met his gaze. A whisper in the blood, a memory that lives in flesh. "He's not alive, Kael, but he's not dead either. They follow him because they believe he will finish what he began, which was to erase the false fire, to end the rule of those who stole it." She handed him a scroll, bound in wax and thread. Within were sigils, maps, and a single line in a language that prickled against Kael's skin. "He sleeps beneath the mountain," Anve said, "but not for long, and when he wakes your duke's walls will crumble like ash." Kael closed the scroll. "Then we have little time." Anve nodded. "Then let's steal it back." For the thief who became a knight now found himself in the strangest of places, allied once more with a thief. But this time, they did not seek gold or relics or secrets. This time, they sought to steal back a future. And from the depths of Harrowfen, they rode eastward toward the mountain where dreams bled into waking, and a king long dead prepared to rise. Their path led through the mire of thorns, where branches grew like grasping fingers, and the fog came not with the morning, but from the ground itself. Old waystones marked the trail in jagged intervals, each inscribed with symbols that whispered in the back of Kael's mind, echoes of languages he had glimpsed only in the deepest vaults of cathedrals. At night, the woods sighed as if remembering. Anve remained quiet for long stretches, her eyes ever scanning the dark. They spoke little, save to plan or to correct their course. It was not the silence of strangers, but of two who carried too many ghosts to waste words. On the 4th day they came upon the ruins of Deltama. What once had been a city of stone and brass now lay sunken, cracked open like a shell. Trees grew through towers. Bones littered the avenues, wrapped in ivy, faceless. It was here, Anve said, the Pale King had first awakened. His body died. His will did not. They found the place marked in the scroll, a stair hidden beneath the altar of a shattered temple, guarded only by silence. Downward they went, into breathless dark. The passages wound like veins, tight and damp, smelling of copper and ash. Symbols lined the walls, not written but carved, not carved but grown. The stone pulsed faintly, like the beat of a slumbering heart. They came to a chamber. There, at its center, lay the sarcophagus. No coffin of wood or stone, but a cocoon of flesh-like crystal, veined and dark. It was suspended between 3 obsidian pillars, each inscribed with runes Kael could not read, but that throbbed with wrongness. Anve knelt. She pulled from her satchel the vials Dunthia had once crafted, the herbs meant not to silence, but to awaken. "This isn't just sleep," she said. "It's memory, woven and locked. We don't break it, we wake it with a lie." Kael understood then. They were not here to kill the Pale King, they were here to rewrite him. She placed the herbs at the crystal's base, murmuring words not her own, voice low, rhythmic. Kael added flame. The reaction was immediate. The crystal groaned, not cracking but shifting. The air grew thick with heat and sorrow. Visions swam at the edge of their minds, battlefields burning with gold fire, a throne crumbling into dust, a child's hand reaching upward, its skin pale as moonlight. Kael staggered. The voice entered his mind like a blade dipped in ice. Thief. He fell to one knee, gripping his skull. But then came another word, softer, colder. Night. He looked up. The cocoon shimmered, and within it the faintest outline of a face, and then, to Kael's horror, recognition. He had seen that face before, not in life, but in the reliquary beneath Everflame years ago, when he had touched the relic that should not have been touched. He had seen a shadow within the stone then, a face pressed to glass. The Pale King had marked him, not recently, long ago. He rose, staggering but standing. "Anve," he gasped, "it knows me." She did not turn. Her voice was calm, flat. "That's why you're here. You're the key." The crystal split, not broken but parted like lips forming a word. A wind burst through the chamber, carrying dust and memories. The figure within opened its eyes. Pale grey, endless. But no scream came, no fury, no command, only stillness. Then, in a voice as old as earth, it spoke, "I remember you. You were the last to touch the fire." Kael stood unmoving. "You are not my enemy," he said. The Pale King tilted his head. "No, but you are not yet my ally." Anve stepped forward. "We don't want your war. We want your knowledge, what you buried. You come to steal it then?" "No," Kael said, "to understand it, and stop what rides in your name." A long silence.